There we go.
Hey everybody, my name's Steve from Beaverton. This session is North Creek High School, a new approach, new school. We have with us a team from Northshore, and they are Todd, Shelby, Gavin, Josh, and Pete. So I think you're in for a big treat for this. So with that, we're going to kick it off.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Josh, out of that list of names you just heard. So I'm going to kick things off. We're here today to present about North Creek High School, which was a new high school we just opened at the beginning of this school year. It was the first year students were in there. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the design process for the school, and then we're going to show you some stuff of the school, some of the design, some of the tech, all that sort of stuff in this brand new school. We would love to take you all on an actual tour of the school, but we're like north of Seattle, so that's a little bit of a trip. So what we're actually going to do today is we created a Google Expedition 3D virtual tour. So a little bit later we'll be handing out viewers. We have a limited number of those, so if you could maybe combine smaller tables combined, and we can give them a couple viewers per table so you guys can take a look when we're at that point. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. All right, so to get started, we're going to do a little video, and this is just a little video of just sort of the different phases of construction of the new school. You kind of get an idea of it, and then we'll show this, give you some basic information about the size of the school and stuff, and then Shelby's going to jump in and start talking about the process that we use to design the new school and some of the cool features it has and how those sort of came to be. So, this video has just cheesy music, but I don't think I have audio hooked up anywhere, but you're not missing anything. It's just cheesy audio. Oh, I could. Maybe I can narrate. That might be better than the video. So the buildings, the school's 3 different buildings. You can kind of see them here. The first shot was just foundations, ultimately. And then you can kind of see the 3 different buildings. The 2 on the left there are instructional buildings, and the big one on the top right there, that's the gym and the theater and commons, art rooms, things like that. Locker rooms, weight room. And then off to the right there on the top, kind of coming in the top on the right, you can see the sports fields in progress for the construction. Here we're jumping to November, a little more completed building. Again, you can kind of see the 3 buildings there. This is building 1 right in front of us, tucked away is building 2, and on the top right there's building 3. Still lots of construction going on, starting to form the parking lot and things like that. Jump forward a couple months, here we are. Again, buildings haven't really changed much on the outside, but a lot of stuff changed on the inside. Some landscaping starting to go in, sidewalks, things like that. Here you can see the play fields a little better, they're actually starting to come in. So, then, this was just a week or 2 ago. So, all the landscaping's in, grass is actually growing where there's dirt. So. All right. So.
Where did you get that awesome footage, Josh?
How did I do that? I have a drone that I flew to create that video. So
So cool, Josh.
Oh, thanks, Shelby. All right. So a little bit about the school. Like you saw, it's 3 buildings, 61 acres. Is that really the size of it? No. Okay. It was built for around 1,600 students. There are about 100 staff currently. This is the first year it's been open. This first year, it's only grades 9 through 11. We didn't make any 12th graders move for their senior year, basically. Next year will be the first year with all 4 grades. So that'll bump up their enrollment and staff a little bit there, because you're adding a whole nother grade. There's a Google map, you can kind of see where it's pinned. We're in North Shore, so we're kind of north end of Lake Washington, north of Seattle. North Creek's really on the very northern edge of our district. Our north end of our district is experiencing huge amounts of growth, tons of houses and things like that. So huge amounts of growth, lots of new families coming in, lots of very, very crowded schools up there. So North Creek was built up there on the north end of things to kind of help address some of that growth. So, okay. All right, and at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Shelby. She's going to talk about some of the design stuff.
Thanks, Josh. So one of the things that makes North Creek such a special school for us is we were regularly building schools in North Shore about every 3 to 5 years up until like the late 90s, and then we stopped. So it had literally been about 20 years since we built a building, which presented a really unique opportunity for us to kind of start from scratch, right? Have some vision, think critically about how the space would be used by students and teachers and families and community. And to prepare for that, we wanted to be really thoughtful about that design process, and we wanted to include a variety of stakeholders, not just teachers, not just folks that would be in the building, but folks from the business community, folks from higher education, leaders in the district, teachers, students, etc. So this was so cool. We had 5 consecutive Fridays where our cabinet level leadership and business partners and higher ed folks and community stakeholders dedicated an entire day to be offsite to do design, to think critically about this space. And if you've ever tried to get your superintendent to be anywhere offsite with you for an entire day, you know what a remarkable thing that is. We had 5 of these days, which was really powerful. We had awesome conversations about the importance of the building, the significance of the building, and how we wanted it to be a place of learning for 21st century kiddos. I don't know what's happening. Okay, we started our charrette with a technique called question storming, which is kind of like brainstorming, except you ask questions, you don't answer them. You're not searching for solutions, you're searching for what the good questions are that you need to be answering. Some of those questions are on these slides, and I'll read them to you because they're small text. One of them was, what role does blended learning play in the design of the educational delivery system for the new high school? Will students be spending less and less time at school and more time with online curriculum research or outside learning opportunities? And what are the implications for facility use and design? This was a question that wouldn't have occurred to us even 20 years ago. Designing a building that could be flexible, that could facilitate blended learning opportunities was kind of a new challenge for us. I don't know why it's doing that. Are there any tech experts in the room? Okay. This one says, I sometimes hear members of the business community suggest that a public K-12 education is not consistently successful at preparing its students for the workplace. If that is accurate, how can the business and educational communities collaborate on a reliable way to baseline and measure the skill sets and expectations necessary for student success? What is the business community's obligation toward that end, and what is the educational community's obligation? This was a really cool question that I do believe came from one of our business partners. And during the design process, we talked about using some of the spaces for incubation for startup companies or for internship pipeline kinds of opportunities. North Shore sits in a biomedical corridor, so we have a lot of biomed companies just like a stone's throw from this building. So we really wanted to think about how we work with those communities, work with those businesses to prepare kids who might end up working there. How do we design a school facility that will be vital and viable for 25 plus years and meets the needs of our 21st century students that isn't outside the stretch of our current secondary teachers? What teacher professional development can be provided for teachers to meet this problem of practice? So this is the notion of, if we're going to design a school that's going to allow for some new ways of teaching, how are we going to prepare our teachers for that? So this wasn't so much about facility, but about preparing people to work and teach in it. How will the new space be flexible in terms of future technology changes in the classroom? Technology changes all the time. You build a building, the technology changes the next day, right? So over 5 sessions, we focused on a series of those questions that came out of the question storming. And the result was an ed spec, a document that would prepare us for actually building the building. Here's a little excerpt. So throughout the ed spec, there's requirements, some philosophical, some technical, mechanical. One of them was the whole school and its site should be used for learning. So this is the notion of every space is a learning space, whether it's outside or inside or in the hall or in a traditional classroom. The design of the interior should maximize the space available for instruction, use the building and its systems as teaching tools, convert circulation space to learning space wherever possible, and maximize display capability. The design should maximize opportunities to extend learning outside the classroom onto the site. So in that flyover video, you saw some big swaths of greenery, so to speak. Those are meant to be learning opportunities. There's actually a wetland on the site that can be used for outdoor science learning and nature walks and things like that. So pretty cool space. And I can share this ed spec if anybody's interested in the full document.
Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're going to start our little virtual tour. We're trying something new here. So these guys will be handing out viewers. A couple things about the viewers, heads up. They're cool when you first, we're gonna pretend like you're all students, sorry, we're working with students. Rule number 1, stay seated while you're viewing, right? Don't be walking around with a viewer over your eyes. You'll run into something. Other thing is, feel free to look around, we'll highlight some stuff. If you are prone for motion sickness, move slowly. Don't be like, oh, hey, look at all this stuff. That'll make you queasy pretty quick. So small, slowly look around. Right now it's probably just some circles that say connecting or green or something like that. We'll start it off here in just a minute once we get all handed out. And again, feel free to kind of join tables, share the viewers. And we'll wait till those get all handed out before we start.
If during the field trip something goes wrong, just throw a hand up.
Yes. Yeah.
No, the whole right itself.
Okay. And we're handing out the last few, I think. So how we're going to do this is we're going to have some slides up here as well, so you can kind of bounce back and forth. We'll highlight some stuff in the virtual 3D look of the school. We'll highlight some stuff up here on the screen to go along with it. And we're hoping this works. We've never actually tried this before, so we'll see. All right. Okay, so we're going to start with the front entrance, just kind of looking at the school from the beginning. Okay, so hopefully something should be popping up in your viewers. Again, please share with your neighbors. Okay. Are you seeing the school? Front door, feel free to look all the way around, it's 360. Hey, Todd, where are you running with that? Oh. Are we good or no?
You might have one. Anyone holding one that doesn't seem to be doing amazing things?
I'm going to highlight something real quick. If you're looking at the front door, if you turn around behind you, it's a little arrow popping up on your screen, kind of guiding you. Yes, maybe. There we go. See all those houses right there across the street from the school? Those weren't there when the construction started for the school. Okay, that was an empty field with a bunch of trees. Now I don't know how many homes there are there, but there's a lot.
170.
No, actually, if you go a little bit to the right, that field is now, they're working on 170 townhomes in that field. So remember we were talking about huge growth on the north end of our district? That's the sort of stuff we're talking about. Huge amounts of growth.
Some really nice people that live there.
Okay, so put the viewers down for just one sec. Talk a little bit about tech real quick. We don't have, we were limited to the number of sort of virtual pictures we could use. So we didn't get one with a clear view of this, but inside the buildings, and this is Bill talks about the tech of the building, we have digital signage. There's no, every building has these big screens. They're just 70-inch flat, or they might be 80-inch there actually. 80-inch flat panel displays. We use Chrome Bits and Google Sign Builder to do all the digital signage. Okay, there's one in each of the 3 buildings, and they all sort of show the same stuff. There's a person on campus who updates it, so like sporting events and plays and musicals and all that sort of stuff. So it has this digital signage piece. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump sort of into the hallway into one of the buildings here. So you should be jumping to a different view. Okay. So what we're looking at here is just sort of inside that front door, just a little bit down the hallway. First thing I want to call out is, as Shelby was talking about earlier, the design of the building was very much, was very focused on that idea of learning happening beyond just the 4 walls of the classroom, right? All the spaces are usable learning spaces, from hallways, outside, all that sort of stuff. One to highlight here is what they call a collaboration cube. Okay? Collaboration cube, there are these little rooms that are just kind of right outside the classrooms. Okay? And in those cubes, there's glass walls, glass doors so you can see in. It's a workspace, right? There's a table in there, there's a panel, so kids or someone wants to work on a presentation, they can do that. We'll jump more into that here in just a minute. I think Gavin will talk more about that. This is just the entrance to one of the classrooms, and probably one of the standout features of this school is most of these classrooms have this glass wall that opens up completely. So in this view, what's highlighted right now is one of those glass walls, but it's currently closed. Okay, but that opens up completely, so your class literally kind of can flow out into the hallway, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute when we look inside a classroom. You'll also notice in the hallway, there's all sorts of tables, chairs, spaces for people to work. Again, that idea of collaboration. And with those walls, the idea that the class can kind of flow straight out from the classroom into the hallway when needed. Okay. So those walls, if you want to look up here on the here on the presentation, they're called Nano Walls, I believe is the name. They're kind of these 8 glass panels. They'll open up, they lock, they close, all that sort of fun stuff. It's really, really simple to open up. Flip the little thing, pull the lever, they kind of accordion. Yeah.
What's on the floor?
What's on the floor?
Carpet.
No, that's no, it's the furniture you slip in. In the picture or in the exhibition?
Like right down at your feet? That is the tripod for the 360 camera. I didn't get edited out. So, yeah.
Is that polished concrete?
No, they're actually tiles of some sort.
Carpet.
Is it carpet?
Yeah.
Oh, carpet, I guess.
Oh, well,
The
I don't know which one you're looking
first
at.
floor is tiled, the second floor is carpet.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's the.
Hey folks, just so you know, we have a lot of slides to show you with not a ton of time. So we're gonna zoom through these, get you all the info, and then we'll try to answer all your questions at the end.
All right, we're gonna jump another scene here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Before we jump, I forgot. If you look up here, here's the actually inside of what one of the collaboration cubes look like. There's a flat panel display right here, so they're working on a group project. They can do that. Little table, glass all the way. Pretty much, 2 of the walls are completely glass, pretty much. So it's really easy to see in from the hallway and from your classroom and things like that. So, and I think Gavin will talk a little bit more about those in a moment. We talked about the hallway spaces. So we're gonna jump a little bit further down the hallway. Did you take over for this one or next
Yeah.
one? All right.
Well, you do this one, I'll start with the next one, and then talk about this too.
You sure?
I'll go from the classroom.
All right, so what we have here is we're in a little bit further down the hallway. The first thing I want to point out is here's a classroom with that glass wall open, completely open. It slides all the way open, completely open to the hallway. It's really kind of cool walking through the hallways, and you can see what's going on in all the classrooms and all of that. So I'm gonna let Gavin take over on this one. Little background here, Gavin is new to our team a couple months ago, but before he joined us, he was actually one of the teachers at North Creek and has practical teaching experience with all of this stuff. So I'm gonna let him take over.
Thanks. I was fortunate enough to teach at North Creek for the first quarter of this school year. I had been working as part of the leadership team with a group put together through Washington Alliance Better Schools. It was 4 teachers from 4 subjects. We got together for an entire year and met and planned, and then met with other teachers and kind of worked on some PD and leadership stuff to talk about how we're going to use this new space for learning, how are we going to get our staff up to speed with block periods, with new types of technology. Everybody was moving into these classrooms that had flat panels. They were getting iPads. So it was a lot of change on top of moving across the district to a whole new school with a staff that had never been together before. So it was a lot to kind of manage from a leadership standpoint, but it was really cool that we had a lot of these opportunities to come together and talk about that stuff. So what you're looking at is my classroom. And one of the things you'll notice as you look around the room, there's a lot of dry erase surfaces. So you might be able to spot the 2 really small whiteboard spaces, but you can actually write on the surface of all the cabinets as well. Those are all dry erase surfaces. The furniture, the desks, kids can write on the desks. That glass nano wall, you can also write on that glass. And then there's also that collaborative space right outside the classroom. So if you turn around and look through the glass wall, you can see this picture on the slide. Oh, you guys are still on.
Yeah, so there's the whiteboard wall.
Sorry, thank you.
Do you want me to steer this for you?
Sure, that would be great. The desk arrangements, you notice they're not the traditional rectangles. They're actually kind of offset a little bit. The idea is that they're most comfortable in an arrangement of 6 in a circle. And there's a couple different designs that you can do with them, but even the furniture choice was selected to be much more collaborative and group oriented than that traditional kind of teacher up in the front of the room sort of model. If you look in the back corner, maybe direct them to the.
That's where they're looking at right now.
Yeah, that's a kind of a flexible little space for differentiation. I often use that as an English teacher to have kids go back there and read quietly if they've been falling behind on a book. Sometimes kids could go back there to collaborate and have a small discussion and then bring what they discovered back. So you could use it for little tiny challenge activities and other cool stuff. It's just a nice little space that's separate from the rest of the classroom environment kind of visually.
What's that different height desk?
Yeah, you might be able to notice too that there's 3 sets of desks in there that are taller than the rest. So it's also configured so that no matter where you end up in the room, everybody has a good sight line. Really cool when you are doing some lecture instruction at the front of the room to be able to look out and see every single one of your kids' faces. You know, kids like to hide behind other kids and kind of disappear. You had really good connection and eye contact with all your students because of that. The interactive presentation system, you see the flat screen. You might be able to see the teacher station as well up there. So you do kind of have that traditional space where a teacher can go to kind of plug in, get connected to their computer, pull up a presentation. But with the iPad, I was able to walk around freely, interact with kids. I could give them the iPad so that they could interact with material. I did a lot with Google Drives and other collaboration stuff, crowdsourcing notes, just finding different ways to make an activity happen out in the classroom space, but also be visible in that interactive panel so that everybody can see what we're building and kind of creating together. And the way we did that, we had the flat panel, the iPad, and we also had a connectivity tool. Reflector was what we sort of used for that screen casting. That was kind of the basic package that all teachers got. We got a lot of good feedback on the interactivity and clarity of that presentation system. I guess maybe the last thing I'll talk about, if you look outside and you see this collaborative space, and then the collaborative cube that Josh was talking about, there's actually 2 of those on either side of this. I felt very fortunate, and I picked this classroom for a reason as part of the leadership group. I knew that I wanted to use those spaces pretty regularly, and a lot of times I would have kids in my classroom, I'd go through a 5-minute warm-up or something, and then I would turn kids loose to have a little bit of choice on where they wanted to go to work, depending on what they were working on. But I'd have kids go out, a group would be sitting out here, they could plug in a computer to the panel on the side, and they could pull up their project or their presentation. They could be going through a little dry rehearsal or just looking at what it looks like on a big screen while they add some content to it. I'd have groups at, there's cafe tables on either side of that. Kids would be sitting at that cafe table, they might be doing a little bit more conversational stuff and kind of planning around a project. Then I had other kids, they would go down to the library, they would check out a connecting cable. They had a Chromebook or a MacBook from a cart that I had in my room, and they'd be connecting that to the flat panels in there. So at one point I had 4 different groups rehearsing in a space that they felt was theirs for a presentation that they were going to be giving the class that they'd been working on for a week or 2. So it's really cool as a teacher to be able to walk from the classroom out into the hallway over to those cubes and have really good one-on-one time with a small group of kids, check in with them, see what they needed, be able to kind of cater to that need, and then be able to go back, pull everybody back into the classroom, turn it over to them to kind of lead stuff. But I really enjoyed my time there. If I didn't want to be in the tech department doing this work, I would be very happy back there still teaching English, except for the essays. That was always my Achilles heel. But, okay, thanks.
We got a couple slides to jump up here. Our next stop is going to be a science classroom. Josh, I'm gonna look over your shoulder just so I can see where you're pointing everybody. Okay, so our science classrooms are a little bit different setup than, it's a bigger space, you know, there's obviously the sinks and the counters and everything. So in these spaces you'll see that there's actually 2 screens. Those are on splitters so we can have 2 different like 2 sources going to those different screens, or it can just be mirrored. That was kind of as I was getting the equipment to get that set up, we had some troubleshooting that we had to replace a few things there. But otherwise, you'll also notice in these spaces that there's not an obvious whiteboard space. So these science classrooms have rolling whiteboards in them. So not a lot of like writable cabinets or any big boards there. But, you know, thanks, Tom. All right, next one here, we got the tables are on casters. So again, we wanted these rooms, the science rooms, to be really flexible. So even if you don't have one of the viewers, you can see up in the picture here that all of those tables are all rollable. And then finally, the science rooms are a little bit different than the others in that there's just so much storage space. So again, up in this photo, we've got all these high cabinets, both with the doors and without. And I think that will.
And there's also storage space between each classroom.
Oh right, yeah, and we do have like a science prep room between each of the, with storage space between each of these science rooms. And again, if you remember back to the beginning, these are like kind of, so these are a bigger format room, and then more of them are in that room or building 3. Let's jump over to CTE. Advance over here. Okay, this is one of the CTE classrooms. So again, over in that building 3, kind of where the biggest building that was on the north end of the campus. These are again, you can see the drop power there at the top. There's, I think, some water jet cutters in this building, or sorry, in this room. This has direct access to a computer lab, and that's the only fixed computer lab, like fixed location lab in the whole campus. Everything else is carts. So we figure for this one, there's going to be some heavy-duty computing going on. So you can see through that garage door there is actually a stationary lab. We've got a CNC machine over here. So again, you can see the drop power. You can see these the big tables there. We've got a 3D printer over here. So Josh, do you know the model on that?
Not off the top of my head. It's a big one.
Yeah. And then again, you can see it as these tables on casters. So again, just trying to make these spaces as flexible as possible, and just make these, make it a really open learning space. All right, I think that does it for CTE. Okay. Yeah, off the top. That's the same shit. Thanks. Cool.
All right, so now we're going to jump over to one of the art rooms, which is actually connected to the same building, kind of in that same building 3 where the CTE rooms are. And this presented a little bit of an interesting issue. The design in language alone, at least, going into the construction of this building was that there would be mobile displays in this room. Where our teacher could move that panel or that display around the room for different reasons when they're working with different types of media. And then we got into the room, once it was a physical room, and we said, how do we do this? There's always going to be either a plug or some sort of cable dangling around somewhere. The room is very long, so if the panel is close to ground level, it's very possible that if the student is all the way to the back of the room, they're not going to be able to see the panel if it's up on the front on a mobile cart. Is the teacher going to put their device on some sort of cart as they push that panel around? There were a lot of things that we just went back and forth and realized that's just not going to work. We couldn't figure out how to make a mobile panel work in this space. So we changed the design a little bit, and as you can see, there is, I believe that's a bigger panel. I believe that's an 80-inch panel up on the wall above the whiteboard. Fun story, when we went in to tour the initial AV connections, they had installed these upside down. So the teacher connection was above the whiteboard at about 10 feet, and the TV connection was right by the ground. And we looked at the guy and we gave him like a shruggy, and he said, "Oh yeah, you know, it happens." So that was good levity in the moment. Yeah. I wanted to make sure you guys notice the length of this room. This is a very long room, and these do have concrete floors. So we knew that screen had to go up. We had to make sure that students could see this from any spot, wherever they were in the room. And from here, we're going to jump to someplace completely different and go back to building 1. Yes?
From a design perspective, was the big tall ceiling in there for purpose in the art?
I don't know, that's a good question. I don't remember the tall ceiling being anything other than it's nice to have tall ceilings and it's pretty and it creates light.
Yeah, it all comes down to natural light. I don't know if you could really see it in the flyover, but all the buildings have these kind of tiered roofs for the most part. The idea being that the wall on the north side has a lot of glass up high. You're not getting direct southern sunlight exposure. You're actually getting this kind of reflected light through there. But it brightens the whole room. The whole school was designed on that kind of principle of natural light with the architecture, and that's one of the ways they were able to achieve that goal.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks, Shelby. So we've jumped over to building 2, and now we're in the library. And the library is one of my favorite spots at North Creek. Talking about building a space that was flexible. I mean, there are so many ways to utilize the space. First thing you might notice on the wall is there are 4 smaller displays, smaller flat panels. These are 65-inch, I think. And these are for small group instruction, group collaboration. Think about that same idea with those collaboration cubes that you saw in the hallway earlier. We have 4 of them right in the library, right where they're doing research and design, right where they're, it's a very open space. There's a lot of meeting that's going on. It's a lot of in and out. With that nano wall, which there is a nano wall in this space as well. I've never seen that nano wall closed.
It is in this picture because it was spring break.
Of course. But other than that, I personally, the number of times I've been in that building, I've never seen it closed. It's a very open, inviting. There aren't the zappy gates for stealing a book. No zappy gates, no beeping is going to happen. So it's very open, it's very natural flow. In addition to the 4 interactive panels, you can also see there's a projector, and there's a drop-down screen for doing full class instruction. Or they also, I believe, do staff meetings up here on the 2nd floor of the library. Again, with that nano wall open, they can just kind of pile behind there. You can see some of the stacks in this room as well, but there are further stacks out in the hallway. It's just very open. Like everything else in the building, it's very, very much flows in and out.
And it's 2 floors.
And I think I said that, yeah, it's 2 floors. Of course. Shelby's going to talk about the library.
So one of my hats that I wear in Northshore is managing the library services program. So I coordinate all the efforts of our teacher librarians across the district. And what I will honestly say, when they first saw the suggestion that the library be 2 floors, heads spun around, because the idea of supervision in a 2-floor library was freaking them out. That has not been a problem, and in fact, I think this might pave the way for we're about to enter into a bond cycle where we're going to build another school, and there's suggestions coming from the teacher librarians who work in this space that will impact the flexibility of the space in our next new building. And I don't know if it's in the picture in the expedition, but all of this shelving that's not attached to the wall is all mobile, so you can move and redesign the space quite easily, and that's been a really fun thing to have in this space as well. What else do I want to say about the library? I would just echo, I guess, what Todd was saying about it being super collaborative and flexible. It's used for a lot of things, not just teaching and learning, but also staff meetings as well. This is a great picture of the outside of the library. That also caused teacher librarians to freak out because those books are on shelves not inside the envelope of the library. And there was this like hand wringing and pearl clutching about books walking away. And finally, after many conversations, we got to the point of saying, what's wrong with that? Like, oh no, they're gonna take a book home and read it. Scary, right? So now that is just chock full of books, and to my knowledge, there has been no theft. No books have walked away, at least not more than you would expect in a standard library.
Thanks, Shelby. So the next scene we're going to go to is actually the library annex. It's a space connected to the library, so we got a virtual tour of that as well. A couple of really nice things that you'll see in this space. There is a green roof that is installed at North Creek. North Creek is LEED Gold certified.
Yes, silver.
Gold or silver, one of those. So they do have the green roof to collect rainwater that gets recycled for use in the building. You'll also see, again, the Nano Wall is open, so it's got that flow. This is a hangout space, a reading space. It's right outside the College and Career Center and the counseling office. So this is really a hub. You know where your kids spend time at the school. They're not in class and they're not at lunch. A lot of times they are going to check in with their counselor. They're finding those spaces to just sort of be. And it's great that one of these spaces where they can just sort of be happens to be right by the library. You'll also see a view of the forum. So we're going to get a little bit more detail about that, but the forum there are two forums. This is the larger one. I'm not going to talk about it because it's not my slide, but there's some really cool stuff, and I really like that they included that in the design. So I think this is going back to Josh to talk about the forum.
Okay.
I don't need your name tag. I need that. Sorry.
Don't you want to be me?
I'm happy with me. Okay. So the forum is kind of a unique space in this in North Creek.
You're there now.
Are you there now? It's actually kind of a multi-function space. One, basic functionality. It's one of the stairways you can use to go up and down between floors. But it also has a functionality of being a space where you can gather together to present class. A couple classes could get together, come watch a speaker there. Classes could do performances there for like a class. There's all sorts of AV in there. There's panels so you can display for presentations. There's sound, mic systems in there. It's just a space that was meant for maximum sort of versatility. You can have a guest speaker meet with multiple classes, like I mentioned. Gavin, did you have some input you wanted to say about this?
Yeah, so I was actually the first teacher to use one of the forums. I got called out in our principal's kudos letter. I felt really good about that. We were doing a presentation and kids were presenting who they were in I think the second or third week of school. So it was one of those kind of icebreaker get to know you things. Of course, being a writing teacher, I wanted to have them present their little bio in some sort of poetic form. And so we used this space. I wasn't at the point with the technology where I had them doing something with the interactive flat panels, but had I taught that whole year, I could see where this would have kind of built up. But it was really nice to be able to go there, have the student be able to speak in a situation that wasn't the classroom, and they could kind of just project easily up to a small stadium of people. And then in the future, we could have gotten into situations where we had classes coming together to collaborate on a project, and then using that space, which is nice and large, to bring students together to either do some kind of presentation or interdisciplinary work was kind of where it was headed.
So a really cool space. This is the one you're looking at in the viewer is the larger of the two. There is a smaller version of this in building 2, sort of same stairwell, just a little bit smaller version. With the exact same sort of setup. There's a screen, there's the mics, and the same sort of ideal and purposes over there. So that's the forum area. What's next? Comments. Yeah, let's jump to the comments. So the commons is the cafeteria / meeting place / multi-purpose room, right? In the photo, you'll see all the lunch tables probably folded up against the wall. But it's this huge space. Probably the biggest feature on that is if you look, there is the big giant 19-foot LED screen on the wall. So that is quite an impressive screen. Originally, the building specs called for just a projector and screen in this space, but I don't know how they did it, but with some vendor, they worked out getting that screen for the same cost as the projector and screen would have cost. I don't know how, but it was a zero-cost swap out, and it's really pretty cool. This space is used a lot for district events as well, things in the evening, after school, so it gets lots of use. The big screen on the end, you can kind of see it in the photo here, but you can also see it in the viewers. There are similar screens to that in the gym, and that's the scoreboard for basketball, volleyball, wrestling, all those things. And there, it's also like during assemblies, they can show videos and things on those. So it's a similar system in the gym. They have one on each wall in the gym. They're smaller than that one. I don't remember the exact size, but it's also in the gym as well. So it's a really pretty cool space. Other thing just to point out, if you look, I think you can see them in the expedition, but there's pillars, like wood pillars, looks like log pillars basically. All those logs and trees were actually trees that were on the original site. They cut them down and then sent them to the mill and got them milled up and used them back in the school. So all the wood in the school is actually from trees that were originally on the site, from the railings to the benches to the desks, to some of the desks and those pillars and all those sorts of things, which is kind of a cool feature as well. So. All right, next we're going to jump and take a look at the theater. Okay, so I wanted to highlight this because the theater is kind of unique. It was designed to try and maximize your flexibility. So there's all sorts of folding seating. Right now, when I took this photo, you can see they were starting to get ready for an upcoming show, so there's some stuff on the stage they're building. It's not a raised stage, as you notice, it's just flat. But then the main seating's folded down in this, rolled out in this picture, okay? So they're getting ready for a show. What this theater is unique, one of the unique things about this theater is that main seating can roll back partially, and you can get some seating from the sides to extend out. So what do they call that? Is that a thrust stage, I think is the term in theater world, I'm not sure. But basically your stage sort of extends out into your audience. You have audience on 3 sides. Not only can you do that, you could take and then put chairs on the stage over here if you want to do like a theater and around sort of aspect. So the theater is really pretty flexible depending on the use and the type of show you want to use. One of the other big things that they always talk about in the theater is if you look straight up, there is no catwalks, it's a high tension grid. So the whole space up there has this grid of wires, these high tension grids that you can just walk across the whole thing. So for lighting, kids can just go up there or whatever, walk across it and put the lights where they need to do. There's not catwalks or anything like that. I went up there once. It's a little freaky to walk across this grid that's just like nothing below you. It's a little adrenaline rush the first time, but it's pretty cool. So, what else? Yeah, up on the top there's a control room. That's where all your lighting and all your sound and fancy mixing boards and light controls that I really don't know much about. They looked cool. They looked fancy, but I don't know those systems very well. But it's all brand new stuff, which is pretty sweet. Was there any more? Oh, yeah. So, that was in the theater, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So in the theater, they spent all this money, and spec'd it all out, got these nice mics, and then they bought mics that were in a frequency range that just got bought out by something or sold or whatever, so you couldn't use them anymore. So they had to replace all these brand new mics with different mics in a different frequency range. So that was a fun thing to try and figure out. Yeah, I forgot about that. So, all right, what's the next slide? All right, a couple just quick things I wanted to mention in general. With new school, there's always road bumps. We ran into quite a few. Someone mentioned it earlier in the science classroom where we had 2 screens, right? We had a lot of issues with those at the beginning of the year, those science classrooms, and I think we ended up, for the most part, the culprit was a splitter, a splitter that was not up to the task that we were asking it, I guess. And it was causing all sorts of issues. We also had some issues with dot cams interacting with the splitter and causing flashing and blinks and lines and all sorts of weird stuff. And so that was a little bit of a process to work out. We also mentioned that in the classrooms, all the classrooms have a flat panel. Teachers have iPads to try and get some of that interactivity back. And we used the reflector tool. We had lots of issues with reflector tool there for a while. Actually, I think we're getting to the point where we'll probably be moving away from that to a different tool. But that was a big hurdle we had for a while there. Kept crashing on people, losing connectivity, all sorts of things. And we did everything we could to try and figure out what the problem was and rectify it, but it's real hit and miss. It's kind of weird. But yeah, so that was one of the other big sort of tech hurdles that we sort of hit with the new school, along with a million other little small things, from, like Todd pointed out, things wired backwards on the plates, or a faceplate that didn't have the wires connected on the backside. The faceplate was just stuck on it, just random stuff. So, yeah.
Just think of one thing, the way they changed the,
Before I get to questions, one thing that did get changed is there were 2 rooms that connect to the library, 2 classrooms. And the initial design thinking had them being sort of like prototyping rooms almost for CTE labs. So the idea is they would have some pretty heavy-duty laser cutters, water jet cutters, 3D printers. So they would be doing their research on how to design and create these things in the library, and then be able to immediately go over to the prefabrication room and create these things. That was the initial design. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is the demands of certain CTE classes became so great that those rooms turned into computer labs for CTE spaces. So they're not dedicated computer labs, but they're essentially just more CTE classrooms, which isn't a bad thing. There was definitely a pivot from what the design was supposed to be.
How many total square feet for the whole building? All 3 buildings together?
Total square feet, anyone know off the top of their head?
Lots.
I don't know. We could probably try and look that up.
Something like that. How about the average size square feet of your regular classroom? Average size classroom, how many square feet?
At North Creek?
Yeah.
We'll find that for you. I don't know off the top of our head.
200.
So good question. I don't know what the actual, Pete will find those stats for us here in a minute. So.
Somebody Googled it.
Okay.
It says online it's about 250,000 square feet.
250,000 square feet for the buildings. Okay. We kind of got through stuff a little quicker than we thought. We have a nice chunk of time. Questions?
You're describing the doors in the library basically never closing, and then the classroom that you were in, it obviously has the same open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My first question is, how often are people actually leaving them open? And the follow-up question is, with these seemingly unique spaces, as a teacher, what have you seen transformative in the education process that has changed because of the space, and what has stayed the same? Speak to.
Yeah, so that makes me think of a couple things. So to answer your first question, first, not every classroom has a nano wall, but because of earthquaking in our region, you do have some of these kind of angular beams that come in, and because of that, structural integrity stuff. There are a few classrooms that just had a glass wall, but it was still open. I would say it runs the spectrum. There were a number of teachers that I saw who kept their classrooms open almost all the time. The science classrooms didn't have a nano wall because they needed that extra space for the eye flushing, safety stuff and other equipment. There were a good portion of teachers would have it open and closed, varying depending on activity, whether or not they were using one of the collaborative spaces. I think that was probably the most common. And then there were a couple teachers, just culture and comfort-wise, while I was there, they hadn't gotten to a place where they were really opening their door very much. You could kind of, well, I'll get to the second part of your question too. So one of the cool things on my prep period would be to walk around, and whether I was going to the library, going to the main office, going to see a colleague, the things that I would see happening in other classrooms isn't completely visible. And so being able to just observe other teachers in action, other students doing things for other classes, immediately it inspires you. Right? It makes you want to ask them, hey, I walked by your room and I saw this awesome thing going on. What were you doing? So it creates conversations. You see it, you walk by another classroom, something's going on, their door's open. It wasn't uncommon to watch a teacher just kind of pop in, listen for a few minutes, maybe even add something to the conversation, and then disappear. So it really did kind of break that fourth wall between the performance going on in the classroom and the audience that was walking around outside. I had kids walk by my classroom at times and stop and hang out for a few moments and interject something and then move on to their classroom. That was a pretty cool experience. There was another point that I was going to make about culture, but I think hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, there are also no bells. So, like I would basically have my wall open. Kids rarely used the door. I would stand at the wall and greet kids as they came in. I didn't do it every day. I didn't greet every kid every day. But usually I'd say hello to a couple kids as they came in, and then if I needed to talk to somebody, I'd grab them and say, hey, I know you were absent for a couple days, let me grab you. And that was before class ever even started. And kids would come in and start doing stuff before the bell rang. And then it kind of helped set that culture of nobody's leaving until I'm done doing what I'm doing, or whoever in the class is leading an activity is done doing what they're doing. And it wasn't perfect. If you got into a lull a couple minutes before, you definitely have some kids just sort of sneak off and wander away. But that wasn't really an issue. We stopped caring about that really hard line between on and off, and it just became kind of a soft transition. I think most of the kids appreciated that lack of a bell structure. I certainly appreciated it. Most of the staff felt the same way. And we revisited it as a leadership group through the first 3 months, and I don't think anything's changed in that time. It'd be interesting to go back and hear after almost a year if everybody's still on that same page, but as far as I know, they haven't brought bells back. Yeah.
I will say it is sort of a surreal experience to be over there when you're walking down the hall and all of a sudden, there's no bell, but all of a sudden there's a hall full of kids coming at you, and then 5 minutes later it's empty again because they all went to their classes. It's pretty crazy.
How do you notify for like a lockdown or something in the different?
They have
Fire with no.
right. They still have fire alarms. They still have all the lockdown alarms and all that stuff. And so there's still all those sorts of things. And along the lines of lockdowns, there's a lot of talk about with the glass walls, how would that work in a lockdown situation. The doors are actually, the walls close pretty quickly and easily, and they lock very simply from the inside. And then there's also screens mounted that can be lowered so you can't see out in the hallway if there was that situation.
I was kind of surprised. Oh, sorry.
What was the question?
No, so in the very first month, we talked about like what